Making it up as I go. That's the Paul Show. Hi, my name's Paul. Welcome to my show. Today we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, like we do most of the time. Today we're going to do the same thing we do just about each and every time. We're going to recap what happened and kind of go over the key beats that occurred for that session, and then how we're going to react to them. And here we go. So a couple things happened last time for our planning session. Overall, the intro, like handing over control to the players to some extent, that intro went relatively well in terms of introducing them to the session and giving them an immediate goal, but also like other things that they could possibly do. Kind of loose ends. Waking them up went smooth overall. We did add a detail of Muriel making lunch as they were traveling. Let's get this tool out. So like they were traveling down the pasture here, but before traveling southward after the day's work was done, they stopped by the ranch house to grab lunch from Muriel, and they brought it down to the fence over there where Eustace, Jiraiya, and Kai were working to one extent or another. Ollivander. Sorry, it sounded like he was getting into some stuff. Hey, you want to be on the video? No? Okay, cool. Right, so they brought lunch down, and then we kind of introduced them to that first combat, and the Gloom Weaver with the Sword Wraith actually was pretty good. It might have been too strong with the Armor of Agathis spell, so it definitely immediately disincentivized my players to attack it during that combat, because they're familiar with the spell at least. But after that one, we started this like get them varmints quest, more or less. So what we had planned out was for them to travel and meet a couple of different encounters. And so one decision I've decided to make in terms of these kinds of quests and such, where they're going through encounters to get to an area and then discover something, at least at this moment in time, I've decided that until the quest is completed, no new encounters will spawn, provided that they succeed the encounters. So there's no immediate need to get all the encounters done in one go. They can travel back and rest up, and then travel back out here for another encounter. Depending on how it goes, they could continue or head back. I want them to be evaluating that decision, kind of communicating with each other, like, hey, I'm out of resources, we should probably head back, or we should probably make camp for the night. I don't know, but trying to influence discussion of it by informing the players that encounters don't respawn until the quest is completed, so they'll then be able to fight other monsters in this area again. Once they finish up that quest, I'll clear out this little line of travel that I've kind of got set for them. And so they started this recon quest, and at recon travel number 2, the Armonite and Gauth encounter that we talked about briefly, it was way too powerful. I feel like my players' resources were drained after the Gloom Weaver and Sword Wraith, but I also didn't anticipate that my Artificer wouldn't use any healing spells, but also my Wizard didn't really bother using too much besides Healing Word. I'm not sure if he really has anything else, but he could cast Shield as well to help certain things, which I'm not aware of him having done. He also has a thing called Potent Cantrip, which he wasn't using last session. I thusly informed him, so hopefully he'll be using that to his advantage this time. As for the Armonite and the Gauth, it was too powerful. The action economy, for some reason, I ended up killing one of my players. Zariath, the character, ended up dying, and so I broke it down for my players at that point and explained to them I could do it like a Pokemon, wherein it's a blackout, they end up back at the ranch. None of that really happened, and they're going to go through those 2 encounters again, potentially. Or I would have a narrative backup, which I did. I kind of made it up on the fly, but also was based off of the fact that Courage, the dog, is a dragon, and so he jumps in at the last moment to destroy the threat, more or less, and Eustace comes with him and Egan. And Egan goes to cast Revivify, because in his character sheet, Egan Longbottom, he's got a book. Egan loves to read on his days off, walking to some secluded spot on the stead underneath a tree, a top level of the barn. It's a book currently lent to him by Harris Skellig, the librarian in Lakeside. So I described what kind of information was in the book in order to justify him casting Revivify on my wizard. It felt pretty good in the moment. Be completely honest with you, I feel like I was able to kind of make it up on the fly, and that's the coolest thing. And so, yeah, I was able to maintain that. What would it be called? Like barrier of illusions. The fourth wall, maintain the fourth wall to some extent. The suspension of reality, I think, is what I'm getting at here. Point being, yeah, we killed him, at which point Courage, Eustace, and Egan stepped in to help out our players real quick. They paid them for more or less like saving them from the Gloomweaver to one extent or another. And then the players decided to head north instead. Seeing that it was a little too difficult, they wanted to go check out the town known as Lakeside up here, so they actually traveled a little while. They went a little off course, like about this much or so, and they encountered a chimera in that last stretch here. It was an impromptu thing because I didn't anticipate them dying in the first place. I was planning on just running combat for that session, to be honest with you guys. And so we gave them an impromptu combat on the way up there after they had long rested and such, and then we gave them the intro to Lakeside, at which point they were caught fancy by a lot of different things, but the main thing was Harris Skellig, and so we read to them this intro to Lakeside, describing the things that they see going on, the trades deals going on, or the supply chain route kind of existing, as well as the Gabriel Malachar, the general in Lakeside. I've been working on the macro of this in terms of the conflict that exists between the towns, and it's more or less that Baron Francis, who lives in Wardwell, excuse me, Baron Francis, who lives in Wardwell, is a fearful and power-hungry baron, wishing to control in a very detailed fashion, and so he's creating slowly but surely a police state in Wardwell, a police state in Calcas, and slowly but surely developing one in Lakeside as well, and that is manifested by his nephew Gabriel Malachar. And so there's going to be a little bit of conflict there that we set up, which is good to have a plan. Always good to have a plan and be able to build off of that eventually for when the players kind of discover those things, and that's for this session. And so they took interest in Harris. I'm going to go to Lakeside Village. And so upon coming in around here, they went straight to the librarian's house. They asked him a couple questions. This character has been the hype of the area for as long as they've been playing, because when they went to Refuge, they what's it called? They met an NPC called Marlin, and he talked about a librarian guy, a scholar named Harris, or the librarian, who lives in Lakeside, is what he was referred to as. Marlin didn't give much detail because he doesn't want to talk about his past, and I still haven't made up his past. But that's enough about that. They talked to Harris. They decided to follow him on his patrol. In his character sheet, I've got it detailed that around midday or the afternoon, he goes around the perimeter of the village, ensuring that wards that create a barrier are still in place and active, that keep, I think it was aberrations and demonkin. Let's see here. Yeah, keeps undead and demonkin out. I said it can, but that's because I'm using like a speech-to-text software. That's aside from the point. But yeah, there's a detail that he goes around on this patrol thing. My players decided to accompany him, and so we kind of get to the point where we talk about the key beats that happened in the session, because that's around the point where we left off. What had ended up happening after this, they followed Harris. They saw him recognize like certain animal tracks or creature tracks, that of a canolith that came, bumped up against the barrier, and went on his way. And a number of other things wherein Harris kind of dropped a little bit of hints at the idea that magic above 9th level exists, because that's pretty cool. And so I've got details for my players to eventually learn about this thing called the Philosopher's Stone, but we'll talk about that in the planning phase. And so my players went on this routine with Harris. Harris went into his house to do his Harris things, and my players were given, before the interaction ended, Harris had also nudged at the idea that he wants to hire them potentially if they can prove their salt, by finding a dragon's head and a blinded hag eye and an anise hag claw. And in providing those things to Harris, he would thusly hire them to escort him down south to recon the area, more or less having the same goal as the Get Them Varmints quest. And right now it's just kind of trying to redirect their attention with another quest, because I still want them to discover that area. That being said, upon completion of this proof of power quest, they will receive a level, and they will get a new quest. It'll be like an update to the quest, because it's the same thread or NPC that's relevant to it. Got a little distracted there. The players finished the routine with Harris. They got that quest from him and were rather excited by it, so they decided to go back to the Chimera's body, chop off the dragon's head, and bring it back to Harris. So it was like an overnight thing. Harris had invited them to tea and crumpets, more or less like breakfast, at his house. However, the players were out longer than anticipated and ended up missing tea time. He's like, "Oh, it's no worry. I had Egan for company. It's all good." So my players don't really have a place to stay at this moment, so I'm going to let them kind of build an impromptu tent or a house or something. There's if we go to the planet map, I'm gonna, for like a downtime activity, they can either like trade for some wood or materials to make tents and stuff. They can potentially buy out bedding in the soldiers' barracks or the fisherman's house. And that'd be interesting to see them interact with the fishermen, but I have no idea what they'd end up doing. But deciding on lodging, I do want to make an activity, and that's one of the things that we're going to start out with in our next session to introduce them to what's going on, because it wasn't too crazy what was happening before the session ended. Holy cow, we're at 13 minutes. That's pretty good though. That's pretty good. That being said, I feel like I do that a lot as a filler, but that's okay. Right, so they went to go chop off the dragon's head. They encountered the Canoloth that was evidenced by the Canoloth tracks that Harris had pointed out to them earlier, and at which point they came back, dropped off the dragon's head, and that's kind of where we left the session. And so they're in Lakeside Village, and I was kind of just goading them to explore the rest of the town, because they kind of just bolted straight for Harris, and I was like, yeah, there's so much more in the town. And so I've got other ways to introduce them to that stuff if they don't want to stick around too long here. But now we can get into the meat of the subject. We're going to talk about the key beats that we've lined up, and then detail how we're going to react to those beats that we just kind of glossed over here. So key beat number one, as far as I'm concerned, is Well, there's a couple of things that I'm concerned about. I'm just going to read them out in the order I have them listed here, but in terms of acting them out, there's a different order to be had, wherein the first one, the first beat, a major beat, is Zareth died. We have to acknowledge that, potentially give a bonus quest. The next thing that happened is we gave them the quest Proof of Power, and so how do we plan to let them complete that quest, you know? Like, what is the task that manifests the quest, that makes up the quest, you know? And so we've got plans to have them do like a forest encounter, roll a d6 for a random encounter out of 6 things that I've curated. And then the third beat in this to cover and react to is the Get Them Varmints quest, whereas it does have the same objective as the potential Hired Help quest, to discover the source of the Underdark Onslaught, thusly the Emerald Keep. And number 4 is Info of Stronger Magic, hinting at extra-levular magic. They're going to be enticed to visit Harris and read books with him, browse about his house, and they're going to roll perception for 3 hours. Over the course of time, they're going to do a thing for 3 hours, more or less. So they're going to browse the books, they're going to take a look at the... So what I've got written down here is they're going to see jars of dissection projects, so some of the Underdark creatures preserved in jars. It's going to be a cool, weird display, I think. They're going to see fishermen fishing from like the windows that might exist in the house. Another thing they could do is see a new corpse float up in the lake. So a thing that I think would be cool is more or less like having a cutscene happen if they roll a 3 for that. So I'm going to roll a d4 when they're in the library. I'm going to have them roll a perception check. The DC is 5, so they're going to roll a d4 often. So they could either see the jars of dissection projects, the fishermen fishing out there, or see a new corpse float up to the surface, or potentially find a book. And so that would be on the 4 out of the d4. That being said, though, the new corpse floating up off of the surface, that would thusly activate some sort of cutscene where Harris is like, "Oh, ooh," and then run out to the dock here and make contact with Arnold, and thusly kind of introduce my players to Arnold should that thing occur. I think between the 3 of them, the DC being 5 and rolling at only a d4, it's very likely that they would see this happen at some point. And so we want to detail the find book feature, because we have in our thing here for Harris, he's got 3 different types of knowledge. Knowledge of extra 11th level magic, a knowledge of a custom aura of vitality spell, it's like an evocation spell, and then number 3 would be human history of Neprum. And so we're going to detail the human history of Neprum as well. We're going to give it like 3 little details, wherein there's knowledge of the monks having been there before the current civilization, the trifecta of villages here. The current civilization, the trifecta of villages, started about 200 years ago. And the third bit of knowledge there is ancient stories tell of gods who built the planet, called it Neprum, and went to sleep beneath the mountain after having built it. And so those 3 things are going to be information that kind of entices them, hopefully, to travel to the southeast corner of the map where this monastery temple, mountain temple is, where a couple monks hang out, and there's like a little dungeon to explore here. Pretty excited for it, but we're like planting the seeds for it now with this currently existing NPC. We detailed number 4 before we finished labeling our table of contents here. Unfortunate, but we'll keep going. The other thing to note here is we're going to start dropping hints of the conflict that currently exists, and we kind of detailed that earlier in Francis and what he is, more or less, and we're going to think about how those actions kind of manifest with it being a police state that he's creating. Um, that's beat 5. And beat 7 is the hint at something more to courage. So the fact that courage was just able to take out the Armanite and the Gauth pretty one-sidedly kind of drops hints that there's more to courage than meets the eye. And so they've got this bonus quest called Tickled Pink, wherein they have to spend what I detailed here is like 10 hours with courage before he reveals some of his true nature, in that he's an ancient silver dragon. And so that's our table of contents. We're going to talk about our quest for Zariath, the Memento Mori bonus quest, because he died, and we gotta acknowledge that. And so to do that, we're giving them a bonus quest get called Memento Mori. How we're going to manifest that, there's going to be a trigger, more or less. Anytime Zariath is in combat and an enemy of his dies, I'm going to have him roll a perception roll, and then an insight roll, provided he succeeds the first one. The DC for the perception would be 10, and then the insight check would be a 15. And then if he gets both of those, I'm going to reveal the task of the quest. And so the task, more or less, is to find a book in Harris's library, read the book in full. He could do that in about 16 hours whenever he decides to take that time in the game. And we're going to talk a little bit about this book. It's also the hint at extra leveler magic, like 10th level magic or something. A book about the Philosopher's Stone and the cost of life to make it. And it's going to be like 10th level or 11th level magic, whatever's more convenient. Probably 11th, because I'm too lazy to change that detail in Harris's thing. And so what he's going to gain is info of life energy and how to transform it into magic. And when he's done reading it, I'm going to have him roll an insight check or an investigation, and the DC for this one is going to be 17. And when he passes, he discovers how to channel one's own energy. And this is manifested by giving him the Meta Magic Adept feat. And I think that's going to be really helpful for him, giving him another resource to either create more spell slots or kind of manipulate his spells to one extent or another. Really speaks to kind of what he's described in his backstory, where he's got this like crazy natural talent that kind of manifests his magic. And so that's the bonus quest, more or less. During this bonus quest, though, or just at the start of the session, we're going to talk about Jiraiya's temporary HP. Before this campaign had started, I had given him a sheet of paper, like a letter from his master, that more or less gives him temporary HP, and it's currently 5. But he's level 6, and they're on track to become level 7, so my decision is to have it kind of work like lay on hands for the paladin, but it's temporary HP, and I'm going to give him a way to distribute it at some point, but that's later on. So it's just going to be his monk level times 5, so 6 times 5 at the moment would be 30. 30 temporary hit points makes him officially the tank of the group. Marwyn here is not typically that interested in face-to-face combat, so I want to give Jiraiya the opportunity to be a little bit beefier, and I think scaling it like lay on hands would be pretty solid at that, especially when he's able to distribute it at some point. But considering that he'd eventually become level 20 times 5 is literally 100 temporary HP, so I think he's going to have a good time with that, especially with wholeness of body at that point. I'm thinking way too far here. We got 23. Nice, it's only been another 10 minutes. Pretty good. I think we're making good time. But yeah, that's beat 1. That's how we're reacting to what we talked about as beat 1. Beat 2 was the Proof of Power quest get. How we're going to react to that is we're going to make sure that all the townsfolk in Lakeside, to some extent or another, have heard stories of hags in the forest to the east here. We're going to put this away. We're using our tools still, so more or less one NPC, whoever they end up talking to about this kind of stuff, is going to say, oh yeah, travel the road 3 miles, then travel 3 miles due east, and you'll come to the forest. Or just travel due east, 5 miles, 5 miles. um, and there's going to be a couple encounters there. The townsfolk talk of hags in the forest. We've dubbed the quest Paranormal Activity. I hope you get a kick out of that. And we need to make it clear yet again that encounters will not replenish until the quest is completed. So if they go and do one encounter and then go back, and then they go do another encounter, back and another and back and another and back, that's totally fine. I'm not going to make them kind of retread already tread ground until the quest is completed and they want to go back in there for something else. We'll make something up when that time comes. But for now, when they get to the place, they're going to roll a d6, and I've got 6 prepared encounters for them. Number 1 would be 4 owl bears and 1 banshee. Number 2 would be 3 fairy dragons and 1 gorgon. Number 3 would be 1 troll and 7 ankegs. Number 4 would be a giant ape and 2 will-o-wisps. Number 5 would be 1 bodak, 5 phase spiders. And number 6 would be 1 anise hag, 2 green hags, and 2 displacer beasts. So they could get lucky and get that last encounter on their first roll. It really depends on their luck, more or less. That determines how quickly they're able to get it done. That being said, though, upon acquiring the hag eye and stuff and bringing it back to Harris, they're going to level up and gain a quest called Hired Help. Harris is going to pay them probably like 50 silver or something for the efforts. Even though it's like a proof that he's able to pay, more or less, I guess. Reassurance, so to speak. And that would be beat 2. One last detail of this one is, at some point along this planescape, we're going to have, like, their first time heading out here, they're going to encounter a Cyclops and 2 Galabdur, and more or less this is kind of like more of a cinematic encounter, where I imagine the Cyclops would be like out in the distance and go, "Oh!" and then he'd grab the boulder next to him, the Galabdur, and overhead it straight at the players, at which point they'll have to do like a dex save and then begin combat. And so he's going to throw one more maybe and then start charging in. So hopefully my players are able to get the Galabdur, and I will definitely be keeping more restraint on the monsters that we use here, even if they're all like challenge 6 in their rating. But yeah, that's everything we've got for beat 2. We labeled the encounters, we talked about the plains encounter, and where they're traveling to, how we plan to deliver that information. So beat 3 is the Get Them Varmints quest, and so it's got the same objective as Hired Help, but upon the completion of the quest, they're going to get another quest. They're going to get 15 gold pieces for reporting the information to Eustace, at which point him, Muriel, and Courage are all going to take up arms and start traveling to take on the Emerald Keep, where I plan to have this crazy cinematic where the Mind Flayers capture Courage and turn him into a Brain Stealer dragon. Potentially. I don't know exactly. There might be another dragon somewhere. I don't know how attached I am to Courage as a character. He's super cool already, but it's only for me. The players don't know too much about him, and so if they're not too attached, I might turn him into a Brain Stealer dragon that they'll have to fight later on. I think that'd be a really, really cool encounter. Especially because it's not even from 5th edition. I think it's like 3.5 or something. That being said, though, that's literally beat 5. They're going to get 15 gold pieces, and then Eustace, Courage, and Muriel are going to head out. And the quest will then be called Brave or Dumb. You decide. And so we move on to beat 4. Beat 4 is info of stronger magic, and we already talked about this one, so I'm not going to cover it again. You can rewind and check it out. Beat 5 is the Conflict of Wardwool. I've got my notes here to say to make a handout of details, add to Harris's sheet, but we already have a general structure of what the problem is from the perspective of at least the librarian in Lakeside, wherein There's Baron Francis, who's creating a police state in these areas out of this weird paranoia for control, for information, for power. And that's going to manifest those conflicts and kind of just dropping seeds, planting seeds here and there for them to eventually encounter. And then we move on to beat 6, our final beat, where we beat 6, yes, sorry, I'm reading the wrong spot in my notes. We hint at something that, oh, we already did detail this one. The hint at something, there's more to courage than meets the eye. And so if they spend around 10 hours with or around courage, courage is eventually going to reveal his nature to some extent or another by, like, changing his skin a little bit, or maybe transforming temporarily while Eustace and Muriel aren't looking. And kind of just showing off that he's freaking a dragon. Crazy, right? And my final note for all of this is to make sure that we detail more encounters for the ravine. That being said, if we go to our encounter builder here, we go to load, we've only got 1, 2, 3, 4 encounters created, and we need 1, 2, 3, 4, and we need 2 more encounters for this ravine area under dark. But it's still sunny in this area. This is where the ground starts to cave over and create this cavern that the Emerald Keep exists in. That being said, that's all we've got planned. And that's we're going to try to react in the best way we can. Obviously, this is a lot of detail going on, but I feel like it's relatively possible to accomplish, especially if we introduce them properly to the session by having them kind of explore Lakeside, and people are going to be talking about the things that they potentially need. Like if they go to Abigail and Harold's, Abigail will like give them a look and say something about the hags. I don't know. But we're going to try to improv those things and insert them where it's relevant while they're exploring the town, and then that'll kind of entice them to go over here. And I really don't think much more is going to happen besides them trying to get this quest done. And so we've got these other things that are going on in Lakeside, and that's really about it. I don't think the session's going to go farther than that. The hired help quest would begin, and they might get down to the ranch at that point, but past that, I think that's where the session would end if we cover about 4 to 5 hours. Especially with the potential amount of combat here, it could make it take a while. But that really depends on their luck. That being said, my name's Paul. I've been making this up as I go. I'm a liar. I have notes. I have notes every time, and this one actually took a couple pages of notes. But yeah, that's the session we've got planned. Thanks for watching. Making it up as I go. That's the Paul Show.